And quite honestly, if you would have told me, 25 years ago that I'd be in the midst of all this, I'd say you're crazy. There's no way one guy could listen to all that.
Green flag in the air.
Hey everyone, welcome back again this week to Hot Lappin' with Lanman, episode 6. This week we're going to be visiting with longtime voice of the World of Outlaws, Johnny Gibson. We're going to ask him about where he got started, how he got to where he is today, lots of other stuff in between, so looking forward to visiting with Johnny. Want to thank everybody for tuning in over the last 5-6 weeks since we got started. If you like what you've been hearing, please tell your friends, tell your family, tell anybody that happens to be interested in the world of dirt track racing to give me a like, give me a follow, share my stuff, subscribe to my stuff. The more the merrier, and that's going to help me out quite a bit. I appreciate all the support so far. Like I said, we've got the World of Outlaws coming up this week from Pevely, where Johnny's at. We're going to talk a little bit about that also. Everybody else is off in the sprint car world. Pevely's going to be the place to be. With that, let's not wait any longer. Let's bring Johnny Gibson into the show. All right, so we got Johnny Gibson with us here today. And Johnny, it's really great to have you here on such short notice.
Well, thanks for having me. I've always appreciated our conversations over the years, and now a chance to do it on public forum.
It's going to be a lot of fun. So let's jump right into this deal. The main thing that I really wanted to ask you, and it's been a big topic, you might not realize it, but around the sprint car world is we had a pretty big scare with Johnny Gibson, kind of caught the sprint car world by surprise here a couple weeks back when you sent out a tweet saying, I'm not going to be at the show tonight. And I know you shared just a little bit with everybody on social media, but tell us just a little bit about what happened and how you're doing now.
First of all, I'm doing pretty well now. It's a matter of kind of adjusting meds and things like that, dosages and so forth. But what happened was basically after the race at Lawton, I got everything packed up with Dirtvision, jumped in my motorhome, drove 4.5 hours to Wichita, got to 81 Speedway at 4 in the morning, parked the motorhome and went to bed. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, I woke up feeling pretty much awful. Feeling like my heart was going to beat out of my chest and just a little bit disoriented. And as it turns out, I drove myself to the emergency room and was diagnosed with A-fib, which is basically an increased heart rate and like a fluttering of the upper chamber of the heart. The doctors think it is hereditary. My dad has it. As a matter of fact, the week between Kennedale and Cotton Bowl, I flew back to Pennsylvania to be with my dad while he underwent cardiac ablation to treat his A-fib. And here we are 2 weeks later, and I'm in the hospital with the same thing. But my dad has it. My aunt on that side of the family has it. So there's definitely a family history of it. Kind of scary moment, but I, came through it okay. Had great doctors. Wesley Woodlawn Hospital in Wichita was fantastic. Again, from the ER department to the cardiology department. But I got in there at 6 a.m. and they got me started on an IV right away and blood tests and all that kind of stuff, EKGs, not an MRI, a CT scan, just all kinds of stuff. And when the doctor came into the room and said, you have A-fib, you're in it right now. I hope you weren't planning on going home tonight. And I said, well, what do you mean? I'm announcing a race tonight.
I'm going to work, man.
Said, no, that's not going to happen. So basically what they want to do is they get you started on anticoagulants and medication to slow down the heart rate. But the biggest thing with A-fib is not necessarily a heart attack, but when the heart gets that increased rate, it's not pumping blood efficiently, and the blood begins to pool in the lower chambers of the heart, and that can lead to blood clots, which can lead to a stroke. So that's why it's so important to keep this under control. And again, we're working on it. I'm now on oral medications, and we're kind of adjusting the dosage as we go and making sure that I'm not getting too much of it, but yet getting enough to keep everything ticking the right way. Down the road, there's a good chance I will be a candidate for maybe a pacemaker and cardiac ablation. But like anything, they want to try to control it with meds first before they do any sort of procedure. Quite honestly, if it were up to me, if I had my choice, I would just go in and do the ablation right now because I saw how well it worked for my dad. But, I'm just following doctor's orders. The weird thing for me is now establishing a primary care physician and finding a cardiologist. Oh, by the way, I'm watching a 75-inch TV screen right in front of me, and the Penguins just scored, so it's 4-0 Penguins over Chicago.
And you know what? What a perfect way to lead into if anybody that's listened to you over the last whatever how many years, if they don't know you're a Penguins fan by now, they don't know very much about Johnny Gibson. And kind of the sad part for you this year, it's been a very down year for the Penguins. Well, and the cool part about it is you're still supporting them.
Yeah, and honestly, I like what I've seen the last couple of weeks. They brought a couple young guys up from Scranton Wilkes-Barre, and they are doing really, really well. Rutger McGroarty. I'm glad I don't have to announce that name at a racetrack. Koivunen has been fantastic, so I have some decent hopes for next year, but it's not going to be a playoff year for the third year in a row, which actually, considering my situation with the heart here the last couple of weeks, may be a good thing. Maybe it's a good thing I don't have to endure playoff hockey with my favorite team.
And I have to give you a little bit of guff also. The terrible towel hanging in the background, something a Broncos fan like me just does not want to see.
Again, all things Pittsburgh, basically. I grew up in the Pittsburgh area, lived in the city of Pittsburgh for quite a while, so I'm a Pittsburgh guy.
Absolutely, and as you should be. So jumping back to the A-fib thing, and you were talking just a little bit more about that, talking about your primary care, and what kind of challenge is that for you trying to be on the road?
It really is, and up until this point, I've never had a primary care physician. If I got sick, I went to an urgent care or something like that, and it didn't happen very often, but I've never been go to a doctor kind of guy. I didn't have a primary care physician, don't go in for yearly checkups, which my girlfriend gets on me all the time about, and she's right, I probably should. It just hasn't happened. But yeah, the challenge is to find somebody somewhere fairly centrally located, so it's somewhere where I pass through often enough or spend enough time in a city to do it. I actually checked with the clinic where my dad goes in Western Pennsylvania, because we're in Pennsylvania enough, and I spend about a month there after World Finals, but they're not taking any new patients. It's difficult to find somebody who's actually accepting new patients, so that's what I'm working on now, but that's the latest thing. But I did have a phone conversation with my cardiologist from Wichita, from the hospital there today, just to kind of keep updated on everything and making sure that things are going in the right direction.
The challenges always continue. So something else we wanted to talk about to you too, which is, this is a minor detail when we're looking at the health aspect of what you're facing and stuff like that. But you found a way to have fun with it too. And some people have said the streak is still alive. And some people have said the streak is no longer alive. Give me your thoughts on that, and then I'll give you mine.
My thought is the streak is still alive because we didn't run the feature, and when we go back, I hopefully will be in the booth to call that race. And when that race is listed in the historical records with the World of Outlaws, the date is going to be October whatever, so nobody's even really, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, really going to remember that race was started at a certain point in April or March, I guess it was at that point. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, the streak is still alive. And if other people don't think it is, that's fine, because it's really not a huge deal. It's not like there's like some sort of competition for having a streak or whatever. I mean, actually, a lot of people thought in their minds the streak ended the year of COVID when I was in the studio in Charlotte calling the race with Tony Bachhoven while he was in the booth at Knoxville for the race that we did there with no fans.
That doesn't count to me either, because everything was on such tight lockdown then. There was so much that we didn't know at the time. You literally could not go according to some of the laws that were out there and things like that. So to me, that would be definitely something that didn't disqualify you from the streak. I also believe that the streak is still alive too, because when that race does actually take place, when they finish the race, you will be live in the tower or whatever they have over there at Wichita, and you'll be calling that race. So to me, that is a streak still intact.
Thank you.
No problem. You know, you're this announcer on the World of Outlaw Tour, and in my opinion, you're the most well-known announcer in the short track circuit, and you've built a reputation by doing it the right way. You've done things right. You've stayed true to your being and to your employer's being, but you've done it the right way. But how does a guy get to become a World of Outlaw racer, especially if you're, say, a long-haired guy trying to make a living running up and down the road being a band member?
Yeah, and again, the story I'm sure is fairly well known by now, but yeah, I grew up as a sprint car fan in Pennsylvania, started going to races with my dad. Going to races with him, I met Kevin Eckert, who introduced me to some people who were involved in the sport, and Kevin was living in Indy, and in 1994, I had been playing in bands in Pittsburgh. I was in a couple bands. A couple of them were fairly successful on a local level, but nothing really national. I was in a band very briefly that had a recording contract, but they had recorded the album before I joined, and I was done. Well, they actually got dropped by the label. We were on MCA Records and got dropped before we could record the second album, so that kind of all fell through. But honestly, in 1994, I was just looking for a change of scenery from Pittsburgh, so I moved to Indy. I moved in with Kevin Eckert and his roommate at the time, Jim LeCount, and my goal was to hook up with a band in Indy and still try to pursue a career in music. But I also started going to more and more races from Indy, a lot closer to everything in the central U.S.
Well, if you live with Kevin Eckert, you're going to races.
Yeah. One of the reasons I moved actually was because I'd been spending so much time going to Indiana when I wasn't playing with the band that just seemed like, okay, this is kind of the place I need to be. But Kevin had introduced me to a gentleman named Bill Woodside, who was part of the sprint car newspaper back in the day that Wayne Kindness published. And Bill also sold programs for the World of Outlaws. So I went to a race and Bill gave me a job basically walking through the stands selling souvenir programs. Hey, get your program here and so on.
You had to have some fancy sayings and stuff, didn't you?
Yeah, names and numbers, cars and stars.
Perfect.
So I started going to more World of Outlaws races, helping Bill sell programs. It was a way to make a couple of extra dollars and to get into the races for free. And I showed up to help Bill at I-96 Speedway the Monday after the King's Royal in 1995, and Bill wasn't there. And Patty Jackson, who was running the souvenir trailer at the time, said, "Can you sell the programs by yourself tonight?" And I said, "Sure." And by the end of the night, they hadn't heard from Bill. So Ted Johnson came to me and said, "We race Wednesday at Memphis, Friday at Battleground Speedway in Houston, and Saturday night at Devil's Bowl. Can you come sell programs? And while we get everything straightened out with Bill, and, if he's back, we'll take care of your expenses and give you some cash and so on." So I quit the job that I was working at the time. I was a overnight editor for newspaper and Yellow Pages ads is what I was doing.
Oh my goodness, that's awesome. That is awesome.
It actually fits in with my college degree is in creative writing. So It kind of worked with that. But it was actually a cool job because I'm basically nocturnal as it is. And it was 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 4 days a week, but I got paid for 5 for working that overnight shift. So I could take off on a Friday morning and say, "Hey, let's go to Little Rock to I-30 or somewhere." And as long as I was back by 11 p.m. Sunday night, I was good to go. So anyway, back to the story with Bill. I showed up at those races, and by the time the races at Memphis were done that Wednesday night, they had heard from Bill, and he had resigned, and they offered me the program gig for the rest of the year. So I did that the rest of 95 and all of 1996. And during that time, World of Outlaws races were being broadcast on TNN. So on the nights that there were TV shows, when I was done selling programs, I'd go work for the TV production company. I'd be a spotter for a cameraman or a runner or whatever that needed to be done. And that's how I met Bobby Gerald, because Bobby was a pit reporter at the time. And Bobby was also announcing at several tracks in California, including King Speedway in Hanford. And when we got out there in September of 96, Bobby asked me to come up to the booth to do an interview. Just wanted to talk to me about what it was like traveling up and down the road with the World of Outlaws. So I went to the booth and talked to Bobby for a little bit, and he said, you know so much about this sport. You seem like you're fairly well-spoken. Have you ever thought about being an announcer? And I said, not really. And he hands me the microphone. He says, the first heat race is coming out. Go ahead, try it.
Right there and then?
Right there and then. Just like completely unexpected. So I called that one heat race and then left the booth with the expectation was, that was, a cool once-in-a-lifetime thing to get to call a race. And Carlton Reimers was in the booth that night. Carlton's the series director now. He was working for Ted Johnson, who was his father-in-law at the time.
Yep.
And I guess Carlton went to Ted and said, hey, we may have found an announcer, because up until that point, the World of Outlaws did not have an announcer. They used whatever local guys were at the track, or sometimes the promoter would hire somebody to come in. Jack Miller did several of those shows, but they weren't a full-time announcer. And the problem with that was local announcers weren't necessarily always interested in doing the World of Outlaws PA reads, the commercials, things like that. So
the business side of things back then. Nobody really thought about the business side, probably.
So we were at Cedar Lake, I believe it was that year, and Echo Water was our QuickTime Award sponsor. And they're based in the Minneapolis area, so they had a bunch of people at Cedar Lake. And the way it was explained to me was they either didn't do the read or didn't do it enough times, but the Echo Water people were not happy. And so Ted and Carlton had been talking about maybe it's time to get a full-time announcer, but it's also fairly expensive. Well, they already had me on the road selling programs. I was already following the series, so then they decided to offer me the job as the full-time announcer, which back in 1997, the year that I started, I didn't even call all of the races. My real purpose was to read the commercials and make sure they got done like twice a night or however many times they were supposed to. Some nights, that's all I did. It was still some nights the local announcer calling the races. It just evolved over a series of years to where I became the World of Outlaws announcer full-time.
So you're telling me that one heat race in Hanford, and Carlton said, this is our guy?
Pretty much, yeah. Again, it was right place, right time. They were looking for an announcer and somebody who could do it fairly inexpensively, and I was already on the road. So at that time, I'll tell you how much I made that first year. I made $2 for every program that got sold, and then I made $200 a night for announcing, and I paid all my own expenses, my fuel, my hotels, everything. Now, at the time, we were probably selling, 30,000 programs in a year. But when I was announcing, I also had to pay somebody else to sit at the table and sell programs for me. So a lot of that $2 became $1 because I was paying somebody to sit there and sell programs. So I spent a lot of nights in really cheap hotels, a lot of nights in the back of my minivan, and a lot of nights crashing on friends' couches all over the country.
I just want to ask a question here because I want to continue with how you got to where you are today. But you said you had to be frugal. Let's just use that word.
Oh, absolutely.
With your travel expenses. But when a guy wants a good shower, you never know what you're going to get walking into a hotel room, especially with a shower head. Something like that, you know what I'm saying? How important is getting a good shower to Johnny Gibson?
You've heard the story. You have heard the story, yes. And this continued from the time that I started right up until I got a motorhome. So that tells you how long I did this. But I traveled with my own shower head. I'd have a big-ass pair of pliers and a shower head. And when I went into the hotel shower head came off. My, super powerful shower head went on. And when it was done, I took mine off and put theirs back on. So I went through a couple shower heads and a lot of nylon tape. Did
you ever forget it? I mean, even once? Dang it.
Never forgot it. Nope.
That's awesome stuff right there. Well, a guy's got to do what he's got to do to keep things rolling, especially when you're trying to get up and down the road and do it as feasibly as possible too. So great story there, and I just wanted to kind of work that in. I knew I was going to work it in at some point during the conversation, and it kind of walked right into that one. So I had to throw that out there.
Yep.
Talk a little bit more about how things progressed for you.
Honestly, it was just one thing leading to another. Announcing a couple of races. Actually, Norman Martin, who was promoting World of Outlaws races, several different locations, and a former World of Outlaws driver, he was the first one that ever had me do an entire night by myself, call the races, do everything by myself. And, once that happened, I think word started to get around, and from there it just kind of mushroomed. And again, we're talking over the course of 2 or 3 years before I was basically doing the vast majority of the World of Outlaws races every night.
At what time, at what point did you become an actual full-time employee announcer for the World of Outlaws?
Officially became a full-time employee and not an independent contractor in 2006. So 11 years after I started working for the World of Outlaws, I became a full-time employee.
Did you ever imagine? Go ahead.
And I think a lot of that had to do with, if you think back to what was going on in 2006, there was another series happening. So that kind of allowed me to, latch on as a full-time guy and finally get expenses paid and, the health insurance, things like that.
Could you ever imagine from the first time you hit the road, selling a couple programs and just trying to be a race fan, to 2006, now you're a full-time employee with these guys and life is good?
Yeah, I had kind of always hoped it would lead that way, but, as far as the announcer side of it, when I started announcing. But when I started going to races and helping Bill sell programs, I never, ever imagined that this would be my life.
Travel back then versus now. And you talked a little bit about how you had to cover your own expenses and riding down the road and looking for hotel rooms versus where you're sitting right now talking to me. How has that made life simpler for you?
It has been absolutely amazing. I think this is my 9th year traveling in a motorhome, and I wish I would have done it 15 years before that. And I was always the guy that was against motorhomes. Like, people would say, "Oh, you need a motorhome," and be like, "No. I always have to work on them. I want to be able to leave in the morning and come back. The bed's made. There's clean towels and things like that." Which probably in the late 90s and early 2000s that was the case. But in my opinion, as time went on, the hotels got worse. They got more expensive, but they got worse. What used to be a place that had 24-hour housekeeping staff now had to get their housekeepers out by 10 a.m. And some rooms got clean, some rooms didn't. There was a little bit of a bed bug resurgence, and I was over it. I was like, I'm ready to do something else. So I got a little motorhome, a little 25-footer, and was still living in Minneapolis, still had an apartment in Shakopee, Minnesota. And that first year that I had the little motorhome, I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And at the same time, I was home 89 nights that entire year between World of Outlaws races and going to Australia in the off season. So I started to think, why am I paying for a place that I'm never really at when I can put that money toward a bigger, nicer motorhome and basically live in it full time and have everything I own with me and not pay an expense that I don't really need.
You kind of led me into this next question. You're originally from Pennsylvania. You moved over to Indiana, but then you said you were living in Shakopee, and that's something I've never known the answer to. And I know you and me have talked a lot, but how does Johnny Gibson end up over in Shakopee, Minnesota, which is, for those that don't know, a suburb of Minneapolis?
Well, I mean, first of all, I love Minneapolis. I love the music scene there. Again, being a former musician, live music every night of the week. If I wanted to go see a band, I could go see a band every night, multiple bands, a fantastic music scene. And, there was probably a girl involved at some point there as well, but we'll just leave it at that.
And I know that you try to keep a lot of your private life to yourself too. So I'm not gonna grill you too hard on that. But I was gonna ask you, when you were talking about your health scare, you're out there by yourself a lot of the time, and you mentioned yourself that you do have a girlfriend. I don't think she can go with you full time, from what I understand. But so when you're out by yourself, and now all of a sudden you have a health condition you need to be aware of, is that something that's in the back of your mind all the time, having people maybe check in on you?
It is, and, when she's not with me, which she is actually with me a majority of the time, but not always. So, Melody Larson's her name. She's my girlfriend. She's also the sales director for Microlite, who was our Last Chance Showdown sponsor. And that's how they got into racing, was when she started dating me. They actually got involved in the sport.
That's cool, and that's probably an easy way to remember that sponsor too, because she's probably going to let you have it if you don't get that one plugged in there at the right time.
Yeah, but no, she has been great. Again, I told you before, she's the one that was on me before. Hey, you need to go get checkups and do this, and of course, typical guy. No. If I'm sick, I'll go to a doctor. And she's also, since this happened a couple of weeks ago, she's kind of become a little bit more of a lifestyle coach and helping me make healthier choices and do things more the right way to keep this from becoming a bigger issue. But she's with me most of the time, but not always. The nice thing about, if there is a nice thing about this happening when it happened in Wichita, she lives in Topeka, so she was only a couple of hours away. She actually was not at the races that night with me, but she was able to drive down when I woke her up at 6:30 in the morning and said, "Hey, I'm in the hospital."
That's just a little bit of luck falling into place sometimes too.
Yeah.
You come from PA. You told us that. That's your background. That's where you started as a race fan. You now travel with the World of Outlaws, which is the greatest traveling series out there. But the Pennsylvania folks would also tell you that their local racing is the best racing in the country also.
I'm going to stop you right there. I am an outlaw guy. I'm an outlaw
you gotta
guy.
Let me ask the question.
I'm not a posse guy, and here's why. I grew up in western Pennsylvania, so my local tracks were Lernerville, Sharon, Tri-City, Mercer, that sort of thing. And those guys are never really considered Pennsylvania posse. When I think Pennsylvania posse, I think central Pennsylvania, Williams Grove, Lincoln, Port Royal, Baps, that sort of thing. So I did not grow up in posse country, even though I grew up in Pennsylvania. So I've never been a posse guy.
All right, so we got that crystal clear. And I figured I was going to know the answer to that one, but I thought it would be something fun to throw in there, being you are a Pennsylvania guy.
Yeah, and again, the rivalry is amazing. I tell people all the time, 5-0 Penguins. I tell people all the time that, if you really want to experience the whole posse versus outlaws thing, you need to go to the Williams Grove National Open. It is the only place that has an atmosphere that I think really rivals college football as far as that rivalry is concerned, that whole us versus them mentality. It is intense, and people take it very seriously. And I think the drivers have it to the point where it's a friendly enough rivalry, but it is still a rivalry. Like, if you ask the World of Outlaws drivers, where do you want to win a race? A lot of them will say Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I will agree with you that, Johnny, but I think some people out on the West Coast are going to argue with you, and I think they have a little bit better argument now than they might have had 20, 25 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not saying Pennsylvania has the best drivers. It's just over the course of the years that has developed into the most intense rivalry. Even if one side or the other goes on a bit of a streak and it gets a little lopsided, I don't think it's anything to do with the California drivers as much as it is the fans. Like, you just don't see that, animosity when we go to California as you do when we go to Pennsylvania.
You don't, that's for sure. The Pennsylvania posse, and they've always had such a huge stronghold out there. And, as a sprint car fan that we know you are, also not just an announcer, the car count's kind of dwindling out there in central Pennsylvania. And not the car counts maybe quite as bad as the car owners, the Al Hamiltons, the Walt Dyers, and all that, that provided great opportunities for these young guys to come out. And is that a concern? Is the vibe shifting a little bit with the way things are in the world today? Why are we losing some of these prominent car owners, and then there's nobody to fill that spot for them once they're gone?
Not necessarily, even on a national level. If you look at where the Outlaws were 20 years ago versus how many guys now fund their own teams or bring funding, have a sponsor that they bring to a car owner. And again, I think that's just the reality of economics today. And I think, a lot of those car owners that were so legendary, it just kind of became accepted that they were going to field a race car, and they were going to do it because they loved the sport and loved, seeing their name on the trophy or being in victory lane. And I'm not saying we don't have any of those left, but I also think that, people like Brian Brown have shown that even on a regional level, you can run your own operation, be secure in your employment, and do things the right way and do very well at it.
And he has, and they're few and far between, but there are some other ones out there that do that also. So up and down the road you go every week, all year long, and you obviously get some different situations at different tracks where tracks have some very well-renowned and well-known announcers that you work with regularly. Let's say this, regularly, annually. I would say Tony Bachhoven in Knoxville. I would say Bobby Gerald out on the West Coast there. Some other announcers, Sean Neistat at Huset's.
Yep.
And is it kind of comforting for you? Is it a good vibe? Is it a weird vibe? What's the vibe knowing you get to go work with these guys that you've worked with in the past, and you know you're going to get an A game from these guys, versus walking into a track that say, hey, our announcer's going to sit in there beside you too, and good luck?
Yeah, the guys that you mentioned, Tony, Sean, Bobby Gerald, I think we work really well together, and that's not something, in my experience at least, that you can work on. Like, you can say, okay, I have to, we do this and we do that. There's just a chemistry that you either have or you don't. The same as a driver and a crew chief. There have been great drivers and great crew chiefs that team up and don't have any success at all. No fault of one or the other, that combination just doesn't work. I will give you an example. Bruce Ellis at Williams Grove, who I dearly love. I consider Bruce a friend, and I look forward to going to Williams Grove just for the conversations with Bruce. But our styles on the microphone never did mesh. I felt like we would trip over each other. We just never had that great back and forth that I've got with Tony and Sean and Bobby. It was kind of a shame because, again, I really enjoyed my time being around Bruce and his friendship, but it just stylistically didn't work. It's one of those things that it has to be on, whether it's you, and I can tell within the first 5 laps of calling a race with somebody, this either works or it doesn't. It's like, it either comes naturally and you have that natural rhythm, or it doesn't.
I was going to say, and I'm not counting on about Bruce, because Bruce is definitely probably one of the most knowledgeable sprint car, just even not as an announcer, but people that could tell you the history, especially in the central Pennsylvania area. But he's always done a great job. So, and I was going to say, without naming any names, and let's not talk about Bruce, because I have a lot of respect for that guy for what he's done out there, just as you do. But do you have a couple announcers that, and I'm not asking you to name names, so I'm not putting you in a spot there. As you're going up and down the road, you're going, man, I'm going here this weekend. It's going to be tough because I know that so-and-so is going to be there.
Not so much anymore. There used to be times like that, but I think now, with Dirtvision and World of Outlaws and Dirtvision in particular, we have a lot more control on who is in the booth with me. I think it's going to work this way because this is a Dirtvision production. It is now much more of a television production. We're on a schedule. I have a producer counting me in and out of commercial breaks, things like that. So that Dirtvision has changed that aspect of it a lot. So now I would say probably not really any place that I can go and say this is going to be horrible or this is going to be bad. Again, the things that I look forward to are the guys that I work with really well. We talk about Sean, we talk about Tony, and Bobby doesn't do much on the West Coast anymore, so I really miss getting to work with Bobby Gerald. I haven't had a chance to call a race with him for a couple of years now. But, again, Sean and Tony, I think those two guys especially, there's something, if you talk about the tracks that we go to now, Knoxville and Huset's, I know when we show up there for a World of Outlaws race, we're going to have a fantastic lead duo in the booth. And honestly, if it were up to me, if we could afford it, if Dirtvision could afford it, if we had the room in the press boxes at the racetracks, I'd have a 3-person booth everywhere we went. It would be me, another announcer to go back and forth with, and an analyst as well. Somebody that we could, a former driver, something like that, we could bounce ideas off of. But again, that is my ideal situation. Unfortunately, it probably doesn't happen. But I've done some races here recently with Dominic Scelzi in the booth as a color commentator. And Dominic
He's done a great job too.
But he explains things in a very entertaining way, but also in a very knowledgeable way. So I really enjoy the races that he's able to come up and do some work with us.
You came from a one-man show running up and down the road with a microphone, calling races in the grandstands, and then doing the Victory Lane interviews also, where you had to hustle down the grandstands, through the fences, around whatever it was to get there.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me the difference about that. Now you get to work with, you have Connor right now, and you had Chase Rodman, and you've had Hannah in the past. You get somebody you can lean on. Is that a kind of a sigh of relief for you, or tell me the difference on that?
100%. It is so much better to have somebody downstairs, to have a pit reporter. I was able to make it work for a long time because I wear an earpiece with the officials' radios. So when a car went into the work area, they would say, hey, he's got a broken radius rod and this and that. And I could relate that to the fans. But it doesn't take the place of having somebody on the scene, number one. And number two, to make it down to do the dash draw and back up to the booth and then down for Victory Lane. There were times when I would get back to the booth after doing the dash draw, and all of a sudden the dash is up next, or the last chance showdown, and I'm out of breath because I just ran down 10 flights of stairs and have to come back to the booth. And the Victory Lane stuff was almost worse because trying to get down through the crowd, who was all trying to leave the grandstands at the same time, I did a lot of stepping over the back of bleachers to get to the bottom of the bleachers and go onto the racetrack. So it's so much better in the way that we do it now.
You said you have a producer talking to you in one ear right now. And you're listening probably to the World of Outlaw officials in another ear. How much stuff is going on behind the scenes for you when you're calling a race?
A lot of stuff going on, but I don't actually. So our producer is Jackson Steele. He's in the Dirtvision trailer. He actually doesn't communicate with me directly via a voice command. He actually will text me, but most of the time it goes through a gentleman named Earnhardt Jaworski, who also runs the big screen and puts up all the pictures and the graphics and things like that on the big screen. And he's the one that communicates with Jackson in the trailer and with the people in the Dirtvision studio in Charlotte. So there's a lot of stuff going on in behind the scenes, between communication with our producer, who is communicating with the cameraman, and who will say, okay, we've got a replay coming up, look for this or look for that. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and I still monitor the World of Outlaws officials radio, because if a start gets called back, I want to know why, or if we have a ruling, I want to be able to explain why something was done the way it was. But a lot of stuff going on. And quite honestly, if you would have told me, 25 years ago that I'd be in the midst of all this, I'd say, you're crazy. There's no way one guy could listen to all that.
And then you have the guys that know a lot, that are like Brad Doty just comes to my mind, that might text you something every now and then that a couple of people might have missed, and it's kind of cool. Can you actually use that stuff?
Oh, 100%. Brad will text me a lot, and I appreciate that. I honestly, anything that will make the broadcast better, that will make the show better, will make it a better experience for the fans, both at the track and at home, I'm all for it. Give me all the information that you can pass along to me. Dean Mills, our cameraman, he shoots a lot of our races. He'll text me as well up on the roof and say, hey, I saw this, and look for that in the replay.
You've been up and down the road for, let's say 97. What's that for years? Have you been doing how many years, let's say now?
So this is my 29th year as the announcer, and in July, it will be my 30th year working for the World of Outlaws.
So your streak is at 23-something, if I'm correct?
Yeah, 23, 57, something like that. I don't,
and that's fine. So let's just say 2,300 plus races.
Yep.
You've seen a couple, and that's probably not counting stuff that happened in Australia or when you're just out race fanning.
Yep.
which is something else that you're a huge fan. Tell us a little bit about your count on tracks and what has to catch Johnny Gibson's eye now to say, hey, I'm going to swing over there and check out that place.
Basically, if a track that I've never been to is running an open wheel program, sprint cars, midgets, something like that, I want to go. I want to see as many tracks as I can, but I don't want to see a track just to say I've seen a race there. So I am 100% absolutely an open wheel snob. So I won't go watch a late model race or stock cars of some kind. I'm an open wheel guy. That's what I do. But yeah, last year I was fortunate enough to make it to my 400th different racetrack to see races.
What is, now I'm going to put you on the spot here, the best race, sprint car race, 410 winged outlaw race that you have ever witnessed?
Oh, God.
Is there one that just sticks out in your mind and it's like, wow?
You know, for as many races as I've seen with the Outlaws and as many races as I've called, you know, there are just so many that, you know, if you say, oh, what about this one or what about that one, I'll say, oh, yeah, that's the one. But honestly, the races that stick out in my mind probably more are races from when I was younger, from before I even started working for the World of Outlaws, just as a race fan, because I didn't get to go as many races then. You know, I was lucky if I went to 20 or 30 races a year. Now I go to 100. But I'm going to go back and name one from way back in the day. And I forget whether it was 84 or 85, but it would have been one of those years. The Sharon Nationals at Sharon Speedway in Hartford, Ohio. Bobby Allen in the 1A and Doug Wolfgang in the Weichert car. Bobby running the bottom, Wolfgang pounding the fence. And actually, after the race, they had to wait and develop a picture to determine who actually won.
That's about as close as it gets, I'd say.
And again, this is obviously long before electronic timing and scoring.
Oh, yeah. I just want to bounce something off you. And there was a race in Grand Forks, I want to say it was 12, 15 years ago. It was Steve Kinzer and Donnie Schatz, and it was the week after the Nationals. And I guarantee you they traded the lead.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that race?
That's one of the reasons that River Cities is my favorite racetrack out of the 400 I've been to.
But there's no video that exists of that race, and I wish it was, because people would be like, that would be the race you would want to take a first timer to, because River City has put on some exceptional shows, and we know that that is your favorite track. Well, anybody that knows Johnny Gibson knows that. But what is your favorite event?
Nationals. I mean, Knoxville Nationals. It's just that's if you only go to one race a year. I mean, that and the King's Royal, between the two of them. But Knoxville, just because it has a little more history than the King's Royal. But I honestly, right now at this point in time in 2025, I would say the racing at Eldora is probably slightly better than at Knoxville, but the event itself, the atmosphere at Nationals, is bigger than King's Royal.
What was your favorite Knoxville Nationals? Because there's been some real doozies.
Again, I'm going to go back to my first one ever, because I got to see one of the best ones as the first time I ever went to the Nationals, 1990. And again, Bobby Allen, part of the mix.
And Sammy Swindell's blowing motor oil out of his car at the same time.
Yep.
Kelly Pryor's down there trying to throw him tear-offs over in turn 4.
And Mark and Steve both blowing up after starting front row.
Yeah, that one was absolutely crazy. So you throw in the Jason Johnson race, because that's one of the top races ever. I think there was a race where Brian Brown actually passed Donnie Schatz with about 4 to go. And that's the first time when I'm in the infield that I've ever heard the crowd over the roar of the cars.
Yep.
That's what tells you there's a good race going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you know, Knoxville Nationals, fortunate enough to have been able to call some of those classic races. You know, sitting beside Jack Miller when Danny Lasowski won his first Nationals for Roth team. I actually wasn't on the call. I was doing more color commentary that night because Jack was still the voice of the Nationals at that time. But, being there for that, again, just so many great memories.
To have a good race, you got to have a good format. And there's lots of different formats out there. The World of Outlaws, now currently, they run time trials and straight up. The High Limit Series does an all-star type where they invert 4. Australia runs 2 heat races.
And actually, they rarely do that anymore. They, except for the Classic, from everything I saw in Australia this year, they have gone more to an American style where there's 1 heat race and maybe the fast qualifier starts 4th or maybe it's straight up. But they've gone to a format that is much more like ours, and I think it's simply the economics of it, where if you're running an extra heat race, you're also going through an extra set of tires maybe and not making any more money for it. So the Australia thing has really become a mirror of the American formats, at least in the last year or so.
Do you think that the format that the World of Outlaws has right now provides better racing, the same racing, or less quality of racing than the invert 4 that the Outlaws had for many years?
Obviously, I think it's better because I'm the one that came up with it. So,
I did not know that. If
you want to blame me, I was the one that talked Brian Carter and the World of Outlaws officials into going to straight-up heat races. I think it provides better racing simply for this reason. Every position in a heat race now means something. When we were doing an inversion of 4, or even before that, an inversion of 6, as long as the 2 fastest qualifiers made it out of their heat race, they were going to the dash. There was really no incentive to try to pass somebody in a heat race. If you were running 3rd, running 2nd made no difference. It was still the same result for you. And everything behind the dash cars was back to qualifying. So again, the heat races, with the exception of making it into the dash, or qualifying for the feature, obviously, were meaningless in a lot of ways. So that's why I said, let's go with the straight-up format, because that does reward the best qualifiers, because you can't just penalize a guy for being fast. But let's make it to where they have to earn their spot. Or, conversely, if you're a poor qualifier, you have a chance to race your way up in the starting field of the feature, whereas with the old format, if you qualified 19th, it didn't matter if you raced up to 2nd in a heat race, you were still going to start 19th in the feature.
Yeah, and there were times also where you could start 10th in a heat race and get to 6th, and you're still starting dead last in the B main because your time puts you right back there.
Absolutely.
What is the craziest non-racing event that has ever happened at a racing event for you? Think about this. It does not include race cars competing on the racetrack. They could be under a yellow flag. They could be sitting in the infield, or it could be something else completely different. Think about it. You've seen a lot of weird stuff.
Oh, yeah. I'm not even going to name the car owner, but there was an event that had a car owner's name followed by the word classic that occurred in the parking lot of the Holiday Inn Express in Fargo. And I'm going to say that is the wildest, craziest thing that I've ever seen involving race cars, not necessarily competing on the racetrack, because it involved crew members pushing cars with female drivers, and there may have been a shirt change involved at some point of this, so...
Okay, so let's go with one at the racetrack, though, where you've got a live crowd there, and something happens, and you're like, what are we going to do here? Or I've never seen that. I can't believe that just happened. Something that catches you completely off guard.
This actually just came up on my Facebook memories a few days ago, or maybe a week or so ago. Just a couple of years ago, I was announcing at Lake Ozark. And as an announcer, you're asked to say, some fairly strange stuff every now and then. But I had somebody come in and say, yeah, we found a set of dentures and would like to try to identify the owner. So could you announce somebody's dentures have been found under the grandstand?
So did we find the owner?
I don't know, and I don't want to know.
Oh, that's funny. Greatest interview you've ever done that you can think of? Maybe at a very emotional time for a driver, or something along those lines. Is there an interview that you've done that you're like just still sticks in your mind to this day?
Oh wow. Let's see. Honestly, the one that sticks out in my mind is not necessarily a World of Outlaws interview, but when Freddie Raymer beat the Outlaws at Lincoln, and I went down and I talked to Freddie, but I also got to interview Fred Raymer. And
Yep.
the emotion in his voice of watching his son win and having him say, this means more to me than any of my wins through my career. It's those types of moments. And there have been more than that, but that's the most recent one that really sticks out to me. And again, I haven't really done the interviews in the last, 3 or 4 years, or maybe a little bit longer now.
Social media has really changed our world. And social media can be very positive if it's done the right way, but it can be very negative too. And some of the fans are just ruthless. And I'm asking you to kind of speak, maybe probably not in a spot that maybe you should, but when the Outlaws have to make a decision, weather-wise or something like that, does social media hurt our sport, or do you think overall it's a positive?
I mean, overall, I think it's a positive, but when it's bad, it is really, really, really bad. Earlier in this conversation, we talked about me beginning my career as an announcer and starting off and getting up and down the road and learning as I went. I was fortunate enough that I had the opportunity to do that before there was social media. And now, to be honest with you, if you're a young announcer getting into the sport, it can be brutal. I mean, I know of announcers that is basically driven out of the business just because they can't handle the negativity, and nor should they have to. I mean, I still make plenty of mistakes, and young guys getting into it are obviously going to make a lot more. But again, you have to understand this is not something you can really go to school for. You are thrown into the fire, and you learn it as you go. And, I'm not saying it's never warranted for there to be criticism, but I'm also saying that it can be done in a more positive way. And again, just, the social media downfall is that it's given everyone with a keyboard a voice that I don't think deserves a voice. And I say that because you can do it anonymously or, hide behind some identity or persona or screen name or whatever. Everything that I have ever done on social media, I'm identified. Hey, here's my email address. Here's my picture or whatever. I post under my own name. And if I have to take heat for something, I'll take the heat for it. But to be able to go out and just, throw something out there that is completely ridiculous and have people actually believe it, because there's no basis for judgment or character. Again, that's what I think is the worst thing about social media.
And there's no repercussions either, and that's why I don't like the anonymous folks out there are the ones that really ruin it, because you just shake your head, and that's what I was wondering. I think overall social media is a good thing if done right.
Yeah, and it's made my job, number one, easier, and number two, it's helped me be better prepared. I can go on social media for this weekend here at Peevely. I've got 72 names on a list of potential entrants for this weekend. Will we have 72? No, but I'm going to have notes on those 72 guys, because any one of them could show up and it wouldn't surprise me. So I can find out a lot of that via social media. I can go to their Twitter page or their Facebook and look and see, hey, have they posted about coming to the race this weekend, or have they posted about not being there? So again, that is a huge bonus for me.
You jumped in front of me there, because that was going to be one of my questions here later on. But I saw that you tweeted just a couple hours ago that you count 72 potential cars for this weekend. You're guessing maybe 50 to 60 realistically.
Yeah, I think that would be a decent guess. Actually, since I posted that, I found out two that were on my list that are not going to be on my list. We just found out recently that Landon Crawley has left the 17 GP. So that's one that I had on my list. And there was somebody else that I had on that I found out now is not coming. But again, that list changes day to day, and it's something I have to try to keep updated.
With streaming that has started, that has really, really taken off, and I think Dirtvision was the first ones to start it. Dirtvision started as a audio-only broadcast first, and then moved to the video side of it. But you tweet as much as you can. I'm at Peevely Speedway setup day. Tell us what goes into a setup day, and what is the difference between a Friday setup day versus you're at a 2-day, 2 different track venue where you have to show up and set up all in the same day versus you can get in there early and do it, a little.
Honestly, if we have the opportunity, like what we'll do here this weekend with 2 nights at this racetrack, if we can get in the day before and set up on a Thursday for a Friday race, that's what we do, because there are cables to run. There is equipment that needs to be connected to the track's PA system because we use our own microphones and all of that sort of stuff. There are things that have to be done to hook into the timing and scoring. Again, there's a lot of basically just physical labor of connecting this cable to this connection, this one to this one. There's a lot that goes into it.
All right, so setup day, and you said there's a lot going on there. Who does that? Is that a one-man gang? Is that Johnny Gibson doing it all? Do you have somebody that helps you out with that?
I mean, I'm the one that sets up the broadcast booth as far as the audio is concerned. Jackson and Connor and, there are different guys that come out from the Dirtvision studios. They run all the cable and get the cameras set up and do all the stuff for the video side of it, but it still all has to tie in together. So I'm there basically when they're there, and there's a lot that goes in to setting up. I mean, we're talking 2 to 3 hours of setup before a race.
Tell us a little bit about the difference between a Dirtvision crew and a World of Outlaw crew. And are you a Dirtvision employee? Or are you a World of Outlaw employee? Because you guys, I believe there's a difference, and you have to coincide.
Yeah, there is actually a difference. And technically, I am a World of Outlaws employee. I am not a Dirtvision employee, even though both are under the World Racing Group umbrella. Carlton Reimers is my supervisor. I am identified with the officials and the sprint car road crew, which I think, I'm very fortunate that way, because the sprint car road crew is not required to live in Charlotte and be in the office during the off season, whereas for the most part, the Dirtvision crew is, now not necessarily our camera operators. A lot of those are freelance guys that we hire, independent contractors for certain events. But it's now, having said that, I have to take part in some of the Dirtvision meetings that go on, the Microsoft Teams meetings. So I'm a little bit of a hybrid. I'm a little bit of both, but if you want to get down to it, technically, I work for the Sprint Car Series.
So the Dirtvision stuff, the meetings you do, you have to do that pro bono?
Yeah, well, the sprint guys take pretty good care of me, so if I have to do a little extra work now and then, that's fine.
Johnny, I know you take your music very seriously, and you have special events, special things that happen during the day, special races. Sometimes you have a day that's in the music world that you like to honor. What decisions go into what music goes into each show?
Basically, that is completely up to me. I get to choose, and it's a lot of it just how I feel that day, or again, if there's a band from a certain city and we're playing in that city, I want to make sure I get that band in, or if something's happened in the music world and we've lost an important artist, I want to make sure I pay tribute to them and play something from them that night. Again, just a lot of it's just my personal taste and things that I think fit what is going on the racetrack. I think I play a lot of stuff during the races that's harder and heavier than what I listen to from my own personal playlists, just because I think that stuff works better with what's going on the track. I think that type of sound that type of ambiance is what works with what people are seeing. I want to get people so charged up by what they're about to see with the music that it makes them want to run through a wall.
Over the years, you kind of created a habit, and people just grow habitual with how we're going to do the four wide, the music for the four wide, and help me with the name of that because I should know it's right there.
So Alan Parsons' project, the song's called Sirius.
Yes, thank you, Sirius. And we are creatures of habit, so we lost Sirius for a couple years there, and I understand the business side for the World of Outlaws. If you have a sponsor that wants to come in and wants that slot, anything's for sale. But
right.
Did you get a lot of feedback, good, bad, in between, about losing that? Because I was at Press Sky for a couple years.
A lot of people were very unhappy with Sirius especially. Now, it actually changed after the Sirius thing, so where I had to play a certain song after I said the four wide spiel. I had to play a certain song, and that didn't get as much feedback, but it got some. But I am so happy to be able to have Sirius back for the four wide and to be able to choose whatever song I want after that part of it.
Another thing that is tradition, and some people say it's run its course, but I just don't think it will ever run its course, and real race fans will probably agree with me. I would hope they would anyway. But your slogan as they go four wide, and what? Let's ask this first. Where did you come up with the idea? How did it ever get there? And it's been edited a few times over the years also to get to the final one that we're at now. Talk about the origin of that.
So the origin goes back to my love of music, and the first band that ever really got me excited about rock and roll music was Kiss. And the Kiss Alive albums, they always were introduced with, "You wanted the best, you got the best, the hottest band in the world, Kiss." So I adjusted that and added the four abreast part of it. And then in 2006, when there was another series competing against the Outlaws, I added the often imitated, never duplicated part.
And why not, huh? The perfect time to throw it in there. We talked about Peevely coming up. We've got a big weekend there with the World of Outlaws. And then we go to what I call the Mecca. One of the very few times the Outlaws get to Knoxville Raceway. Track time is so important there for all these guys as the Nationals takes place there every year. What kind of field are you expecting to see over at Knoxville if you've got 76, potential, which we realize isn't real, but Knoxville, that's got to be a big number too, I would think.
Honestly, I look for more than 60 cars at Knoxville. I'm thinking we'll be between 50 and 60 this weekend at Peevely, but I'm saying 60 plus at Knoxville.
That's a good thing for Knoxville, and that's a better thing for the World of Outlaws to show the support there for both facilities too. So that's exciting to see, and everybody knows that. And the track's going to be different in April than it's going to be in August. We know that, but they just value that track time there so much. And why do you think that is?
Well, just because the biggest race in the world takes place there. The Knoxville Nationals can make or break somebody's season. There aren't many races that you can say, hey, if I do well in this race, I've made my whole year. The payouts are just so incredible, all the way down through the field. The start money, is it $12,000 to start now? The feature on Saturday night?
Yep.
It's just because a lot of races, there are a lot of big numbers out there, but just I'm not talking just for the feature. I'm talking about the whole week long. The money for heat races, the money for quick time, the preliminary features, just everything. It's just that amount of money can change people's lives.
Sprint car racing has really changed a lot over the last 20 years. And when I say that, it's due to the fact that everybody can get the same cars, the same motors, the same shocks, the same equipment.
Yes.
And when I started going to the Knoxville Nationals, many people will remember, so let's not say that, but they used to invert 10 cars in the heat races on the qualifying nights. And it got to be a couple things, I think. It got to be too difficult, and it got to be where the real slow cars were on the front row. and they were probably tearing up some equipment because there's going to be some bonsai moves. So they've moved it to 8 right now. Is 8 too many right now?
My opinion, yes. And again, this has a lot to do with exactly what you were talking about, where the cars are just so equal today that, being able to make a move and come from deep in the field like that in a heat race, let's be honest, something has to go your way in some sort of a break, whether it's somebody in front of you gets together with somebody else, or two guys go for the same spot and opens up a lane up top. But honestly, if everybody gets the start that they want, nobody's going to come from row 4 and win a heat race and maybe even advance. Look at the last few years. How many of the fastest qualifiers from a heat race have been in the Last Chance Showdown?
Is 50 laps for the A main too many on Saturday night?
Yes. Absolutely.
What would you like to see on a Saturday night at the Knoxville Nationals?
30 laps. No fuel stops, no stops planned. Again, I am not a fan of any race that has a planned stop. You occasionally need to have fuel stops when circumstances go awry, but any race that has a planned fuel stop, I am not a fan of. Now, there will be people that argue we've had great races in the 50-lap features, and there's no doubt that we have. I'm just more of a traditionalist. I would rather see 30 laps. Or if you want to run more, hey, we'll try 40 like they do at the Williams Grove National Open. We'll try 40, and if we go straight through, we might be able to make it. 40 laps in August at Knoxville.
Yep.
And probably 40 laps on a tank of fuel, probably. Or 35 even. So it's something that, if we go straight through, we will not have to have a stop. But I just don't like planned stops.
The one thing I want to see is where I don't want to say fuel economy, because then we're going to that pavement side of the world that I don't want anything to do with. But I want to see the tires wear out. I want to see the track condition change, and I want to see the best car, the best driver, and the best crew have an opportunity to win that race, and not make the importance of being in those first 2 rows so important. And I just think the tires don't wear out. What I would like to see is I'd like to see 40 laps, like you said, mandatory 33-gallon tank. You know that going into the Nationals, okay? You want to race for however big a purse that is, you better be willing to buy a tank. And you can use it for the rest of your life if you want, if it's only there. A big, and when I say big, it's only 33 gallons. Mandatory 33-gallon tank, 40 laps, X amount of caution laps, and we're going to have a quick fuel stop only. And if we do the 50-lap thing still, at the break, no tires.
I would agree with that. I don't think... Well, actually, at the Nationals, you probably could do a fuel-only stop because you have enough officials there between the Knoxville and World of Outlaws officials. You can have a guy at every car. That's the reason the World of Outlaws don't do fuel-only. When we have to have a fuel stop, it is complete open red because it is too difficult to try to police somebody putting a wrench on a car somewhere with only 4 or 5 officials, even if you have some of them up top looking down. It is going to be very easy to see somebody change a tire because even if an official doesn't see it, there's going to be another team that sees it and points it out. Like, hey, look
they're going to police themselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Johnny, you said you've done this for 30 years, on or about, whatever.
Right.
How long does this go on for you? First of all, this is a huge sacrifice because you give up family, you give up special events, you miss weddings, you miss graduations, you miss everything because you are literally married to your job. And for 30 years, you've done that. And obviously, you very much enjoy your job. But when is enough and you say, hey, maybe it's time to call it a career? And I'm not pushing for that. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying this.
I get it. With this A-fib thing or whatever, I don't know if it's changed any. But I would say, as long as I'm physically capable of doing it, I think I could possibly go another 20 years, 15 to 20. Now, having said that, Yes, I love my job. I would not want to do any other job in the world. But if I win $54 million on the Powerball tonight, I'm probably going to call it a career.
You're not even going to make it
a lot of races, but at this point, at 56 years old, if I don't need a job of any kind, I'm probably not going to have a job of any kind. I'm going to enjoy myself a little bit more, or at least be able to do some of those things that you talked about that I've never been able to do. You can't plan for a week at the lake during the summer with your friends, or the biggest thing for me is concerts. Like
I know.
Music festivals, things like that. I would love to go to some of those.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, people don't understand the sacrifices some of the people make to continue to do this year in and year out. So, Johnny, I really appreciate you coming on with me here tonight. I can't believe it's already been over an hour, but just thanks so much for coming on and sharing a lot of your behind the scenes stuff with a lot of people that might not understand. You've definitely earned the reputation you have, and I think that's the best announcer out there ever to do the job in the dirt track world, and maybe overall you've done it the right way, and it's just been fun getting the background behind you, where you came from, and some of your opinions on different things.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate you having me on. Like I said, you and I go back together a long, long way, and I appreciate all that you've done for me.
All right. So you're in Peevely, like you said. You're getting set up. I hope you guys have a great weekend over there, and another great weekend at Knoxville. Good chance I'll see you in Knoxville. But like I said, thanks again.
You might turn up there.
All right. So safe travels, and thanks for dropping by, bud.
Thanks, man.
All right, everyone. Appreciate everyone tagging along for the listen in on our talk with Johnny Gibson today. Some great stories he shared with us, and just a cool life to live out there. If you want to be out there following the World of Outlaws and your favorite dirt track series. With that, I'm going to get on out of here. Before that, I want to give a quick thanks to a couple people that have helped me out quite a bit the last couple weeks since we basically started this thing. Want to thank Krista Strand once again for doing some behind-the-scenes work for me. Want to thank my brother Lonnie Nichols. He's helped us out with a lot of pointers on getting this thing up and off the ground, too. Appreciate all of you fans for following along and watching me, and that means a lot to me also. Also want to mention any of the video clips I use on here, I have gotten permission from Dirtvision to use those. I need to acknowledge that a little bit more, but everything has been okayed by Dirtvision to put their clips on here. Want to remind you, if you liked what you heard today, what you've heard in the past, follow, share, like, subscribe. I appreciate you guys so much for doing that. I can't do this without you. Look forward to seeing you guys next week. Have a great weekend. Get out to the dirt tracks. Support your local dirt track. See you next time, everyone.